Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today I've got some Let's Not Meet for you all. Some mildly spooky stories of creepy encounters with other individuals that make you think to yourself, let's not meet, as the subreddit title suggests. Don't forget to use code Oz at checkout with GamerSubs for 10% off and to support the channel directly. Correct Detective 927. To the girl I was best friends with in elementary school. It seems we have an introductory edit for some context. Since I messed up my age quite a bit, my family was only in that state for about 2 years in my early childhood. I was in 4th grade when this all happened. It all hit the fan in 5th grade, us moving back in the middle of the year. I guess that would make me younger than I remember to be. I guess the whole situation feeling so serious and adult that I just thought I was older when it happened. Sorry for the confusion. I guess more accurately, I'm 22 currently. I did go back and check my mom's Facebook to confirm that we were in that new state in 2012 though. Sorry for any confusion. When I was in the 3rd grade, my family and I moved out of state for my dad's job. I started at a new elementary school and made fast friends with a girl I'll call Maria. The two of us were inseparable, but her hobbies were something I wasn't used to. This was about 2012, and a big thing she loved was gore. Not just any scary movie gore, but My Little Pony gore really introduced me to a dark side of the internet for an 11-year-old girl. She kept a binder full of these gory images and often showed them to me on the bus. First red flag. Second red flag, the boyfriend. Being a literal child at the time, I didn't understand the sudden interest of dating from my peers. But Maria had a boyfriend. It was your typical elementary school relationship, giggling at just holding hands, and it was as short-lived as any elementary school relationship, with him breaking up with her without a care in the world. But she did not take this well. She gathered our little crew in the playground, me, her right-hand man. She laid out the plan. We were going to chase the boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend I guess, catch him, hold him down, and she would beat him up I guess? We all didn't want to do this obviously, but she zeroed in on me. I was her best friend after all. I was supposed to do this for her. I, being the stupid 11-year-old I was, told her she was acting insane and I was going to go play with the boys. From that point on, we weren't best friends. She was my bully. She harassed me endlessly, little texts constantly popping up on my flip phone, calling me names on the bus, telling authority figures that I had started it. Eventually, this accumulated into a sit-down with the principal where we both were scolded and told to play nice. For a bit, everything was calm. Then, the art room scissors started going missing. Red flag number 3. I had been chatting with a friend on the bus when Maria had put a pair of the scissors very close to my neck. She laughed it off and I stayed quiet, just wanting to keep some sort of peace at school. I knew she had stolen them. Never understood why I never said anything. Things were quiet for a while again. But one day, a day that still haunts me, a day that has put up barriers in me that I shouldn't have had at a young age. I was taking my usual bus route, arriving early and taking a seat near the back. Maria arrives, sitting by herself on the opposite side near the front. We took off and began the ride to school. As we were nearing the elementary school, mine and Maria's eyes locked. I'll never forget that smile. She proceeded to pull a kitchen knife from her bag, one of the big ones from a knife block. She flashed to me before zipping the bag as the bus came to a stop. I remember sitting in my seat as everyone piled off the bus. I don't remember much after that. I remember freaking out in front of the school. I remember sitting in the office all day. I remember talking to men in uniforms. I remember reading something I probably shouldn't have. She was planning to hurt me and the boy who broke up with her. She was suspended for the rest of the year and I moved before she came back, and I never saw her again. So, to the girl that I was best friends in elementary school, let's not meet again. Yeah, this checks out, especially with the My Little Pony gore. That's an actual thing that was happening. It still is actually happening. I remember when growing up, my friend's little sister stumbled upon FNAF when she was 8 years old and started drawing a bunch of pictures of, FNAF-related stuff. And of course, her parents seeing her drawing scary metal monster animals and dead children definitely caused a lot of red flags to be raised and ask for potential psychiatric help because you don't expect your child to be drawing that kind of stuff. You definitely got to be careful about giving children unrestricted access to the internet because they could definitely stumble upon some stuff that could really do some serious psychological damage to them long term. Many patient 2894. Were my friend and I almost taken by a tourist guide in Greece? Now, this happened in summer of 2015 to me, 30 female, and my friend, 30 female. Let's call her Claire. We were both 21 and backpacking together. We still talk about this story, and we wonder if we were actually in any real danger. I told her I was going to post this here and get some opinions. When we got to the Greece portion of the trip, we started in Athens and then took the ferries to the other islands. The first island we visited was Crete, and the only luggage we had was one large backpack each and one shoulder bag each. We got off the very long, about 10 hours, ferry ride to Crete just when the sun was starting to go down. It wasn't dark at all yet, but the sky was becoming pale pink and blue. When we disembarked and found ourselves in the port, we looked like classic tourists. Maps stretched out in front of us, spinning around, pointing here, pointing there, looking confused, trying to orientate ourselves so that we could walk the half-hour walk to our hostel. There are several people standing offering us taxis as we experienced every time we arrived to a new island. Men or women would approach us saying they could drive us to where we needed to be, etc. We actually took someone up on it once and it worked out well, and we ended up using them for the rest of our stay on the island. We couldn't figure out how to get to our hostel, even with our maps and transit information. Heraklion was bigger than most of the other island towns, and we were nervous that it was going to be dark soon and we didn't want to get lost. Then, right when we were looking at each other, deciding that maybe we'd bite the bullet and take a taxi, a man approached us. He was medium height, medium build, looked to be in his mid-30s, and was very handsome. Great smile, long, dark hair, great teeth, clean cut, nice linen outfit. He was holding a weird velvet pouch thing, almost looked like the velvet bag that the Scrabble letters come in. He looked super friendly and greeted us, told us that he had a taxi company and could take us into town, and we agreed. He told us they were parked just around the corner from the port, a couple of blocks away because he didn't want to use the port parking or spend a long time getting out of the congested, pedestrian-heavy part near the docks. He told us to follow him. It was just a 5-minute walk up the street and around the bend. Claire and I looked at each other and agreed. I think we both thought he was really handsome. I don't really remember why we were so easily persuaded. I think we were also just exhausted from a long day of travel, so we leave the port with him and start walking on the road. This is where it starts to get weird. He told us he was a tourist guide, that he had a tourism company, and that's why he had this car. We thought before he said he had a taxi company, but whatever, maybe it was the same thing. We then asked where he was from, and he said Madrid. Now, I speak fluent Spanish, as I actually lived in Madrid for a little bit as a teenager, and I rejoiced at the opportunity to practice, and I started speaking to him in Spanish. He looked at me completely confused and then doubled back to say, "Oh, actually, I don't speak Spanish. I'm actually Hungarian, but my parents live in Madrid," or something very confusing and different than what he had just said. We shrugged it off, but it was the first time Claire and I caught each other's eye behind his back and gave each other looks. We'd been walking for about 5 minutes now, with no indication of where he planned on taking us or where his taxi was. This seemed weird to us. A taxi company that you had to walk to? When Claire was telling him we were in a university, he was smiling and friendly and charming and saying that he was also a student and lived in Barcelona and was studying there to become a lawyer. Then I asked him, "Wait, don't you have a tourism company here?" And he stopped. His face fell, and he looked like he'd just been busted. He then changed his story around to include all things, and I forgot what he came up with. Something about how he was a part-time student, but also had a tourism company in Greece to pay for his school. It made no sense, and at that point, Claire and I were trying to catch him out. But it was okay. We were on a busy road, a wide avenue with lots of cars, a main street in the city, and it was still light enough. He asked us where our hostel was, aka where'd he be driving to. We said, "Where's your car?" And he said, "Oh, it's just up here," indicating a turn around the block which would lead us off into a side street that was lined with 10 feet tall hedges. Again, he asked us where our hostel was, and, this was stupid of me, I stopped and took my phone out of my purse, with the three of us leaning in to look at the address and where it was on the map that I had screenshotted. Claire noticed that I was gripping my phone so hard that my fingers were white, because I didn't want him to snatch it out of my hands. I will never forget what happened next. He was nodding as he was looking at the map, and then just said, "Okay, my car is just another 5 or 10 minute walk around this corner." And Claire and I looked at each other. What happened next occurred over the span of about 3 seconds. We have both spoken about this feeling we felt in that second, like we both went ice cold from our crowns to our toes. It was a real moment of panic. My first instinct was to grip my purse immediately, which I did, and he noticed because his eyes immediately flickered down to it. And then Claire and I looked again at each other, and without even needing to communicate, we both gave the other a nod of the head, as if to say, okay, go. We both ran directly into the road, cars honked, and we stopped traffic, and in fact, almost caused a car to bonk into another because everyone screeched to a stop. After we ran across the avenue and got to a little strip of grass in the middle of that divided road, we looked back and he was absolutely nowhere to be seen. Nowhere. We looked at the direction we'd come, at the way he was going, and he was nowhere. The only place he could have gone was into the bushes. We also were able to see around the corner he wanted us to turn with him, and the whole way down that side street, there were no cars parked. We could see about a 15-minute walk down the street, and not a single vehicle was anywhere in our field of vision. If anyone has any ideas on what this might have been, Claire and I would love to know. So, creepy tourist guy from where the fuck ever, I hope we never meet again. In any circumstance, this is incredibly sketchy. Either he was planning to rob you guys and taking you into a secluded area where, he could easily get away, assuming that he was probably faster, stronger, able to easily overpower and take some nice goodies from some tourists. Doesn't seem likely though, as it sounds like you guys were just wearing backpacks and bags, so I don't know if you guys would be a good mark. With all the details described, it definitely does sound like some kind of ploy that had nefarious intentions, especially with his backstory changing and him being caught off guard with the Spanish. I would say that in every circumstance, running was 100% the correct choice. It wasn't my cat. Hello, my name is Alex, and here's my story. At the time, I was in my old bedroom, which was basically one of the smallest rooms in the house. I'm now in a new bedroom. This one is way more spacious. My bedroom was about a 5 by 5 meter, and it could only fit a bed, 2 nightstands, and a dresser with a mirror screwed on top. It was in the basement. Now, most of you guys probably think a basement is dark, creepy, and eerie, but mine was not. My parents made sure to make this as full of life as possible. They painted the walls, installed the gaming room, which I use often, and basically making it really cool if someone in our family wanted to have a party there. Now, the room that I had, I think it was actually fair that I had that one room, because before we moved houses, both of my brothers had to sleep in a tiny bedroom, about 5 square feet large. Basically, the worst, and I had the biggest room in the whole house. So at the time, we had 3 cats. One died later on after what I had lived, but that's not really relevant to the story. One of the 3 was my favorite. I loved her and took care of her, and she made sure I wasn't depressed. Sometimes we would just let her go outside during the night, and I would let her go in sometimes when she scratched on my window. She still does it to this day. I was an insomniac, and I never slept well. My parents knew about it, so they decided to get some melatonin pills to help me sleep. My window was on top of the bedroom's wall, which meant that my cat didn't need to hop onto any ledge or border to scratch with her paws on it from the outside, letting me know that she wanted to get in. It was a night that I decided to take some melatonin pills, which worked fantastically when I couldn't sleep, and so I was literally about to sleep, like I was on the edge of dreaming, and I heard my cat scratch, or so I thought. I sighed and got up to move my curtains out of the way so I could let her in, but when I opened my window, I heard something move, or step on rocks that were around my window. At that time, I was too sleepy to realize that it wasn't a cat's footsteps that I heard, but a human's. So, as a normal person, I yelled my cat's name and put my hand out of the window to tap on the ground, as such to let my cat know that she could come to get in. That was my mistake. In no time, I heard footsteps coming straight to the window. I felt a man's hand grab my arm and start to pull me out of my window. I started screaming for someone to come and help me, but nobody came. I felt the adrenaline instantly rush to my body and quickly grabbed a sharp object. I believe it was a dirty knife covered in old food, and stabbed the guy's hand. Blood dripped out of it as I heard a blood-curdling scream, the scream I would remember my whole life. The man quickly ran away as fast as he could, and I fell back on my bed, opening my door and running as fast as I could upstairs to my parents' bedroom to tell them the horror story I just lived. They woke up fast and called the cops, reassuring me that I was safe and everything, caring for my horrible wound from the man's grip on my arm. They arrived at the house and I told them what happened. I was still under adrenaline, my words not sounding very clear, with the man's blood that was on the knife. They managed to get his name and where he lived. They followed up on us and told us that he got arrested for attempted kidnapping and that he already got charged with many other crimes before. I'm still traumatized to this day. So, I normally try to avoid questioning stories because you never really know. But in situations like this, I do have some questions. The ending feels very convenient, almost fairy tale-esque if I'm going to be honest. It feels like too much of a coincidence that they would have this suspected kidnapper's blood on file, that they would be able to pick it up with no contamination, especially when it was a knife covered in old food, and be able to get a positive ID match. I usually try to let those of you in the comments be the deciding factor if a story is fake or not, and just read them and enjoy them, but I'm not 19 anymore, gang. I don't know. I'll have to ask you guys what you feel, if I should call a story out, if I feel it's fake or not, but genuinely, I don't know. I'll leave it up to you guys. If you guys want to be the deciding factor and I should just give my basic, non-accusatory opinions, or if I should be a bit more harsh and critical of them. Genuinely. Let me know in the comments. In my opinion, I think that half of this story is probably true. I think this person lives in a basement-style room. They heard something at their window, opened their door, and their cat wasn't there, expecting to be their cat. Probably something creepy happened. Maybe it was someone trespassing, and it led to the romanticization or exaggeration of events to fit on this subreddit, feeling like they didn't quite meet the criteria initially and adding their own modifications. But that's my opinion. I'd be curious to hear yours. I'm going to try not to do this very often, but let me know what you all think. Hygh 72-1. There's a man at the end of the street. He's been watching us for years. Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well. This first started happening 15 years ago, and would take place over the next 13 years of my life. It all started in summertime, about 4 months after we had moved to a new house in a different state. I was 9 years old at the time, and I didn't really have any friends in the area. One day, I was out in the front yard helping my dad with yard work. He would mow the front and backyards, and I would either pick dandelions out of the ground or water the plants at the front of the house. Not super helpful, I know, but I was 9 and wasn't allowed to do anything with the lawnmower besides maybe pull the cord to start the mower. My dad had just finished the front yard and had moved his way to the backyard, while I stayed in the front yard to finish up. I remember seeing a package on the porch in front of our door and going up to pick it up. And that was when I turned around and saw him. A man in his late 30s, with long dark hair tied in a ponytail hanging down past his shoulders, wearing a plain white t-shirt, black pajama pants, and no socks or shoes. He was standing at the end of our street, standing with his arms crossed and staring directly at me. Now for context, my house is 4 houses down from the end of the street. At the end of my street, there is a road that forms a T-shaped intersection. On the other side of this intersection from my house, there are 3 houses, with one house lined up in the middle of my street and the other 2 houses sitting to the right of it. To the left of the house lined up with my street is an old steel treating factory that existed surrounded by houses in our neighborhood, and, at the time, was still active 24/7. This man was standing in front of his house lined up with my street, at the top of the T-shaped intersection. He was standing right off the edge of the street and in front of what I assumed was his house, just staring at me. As soon as I saw him, I immediately froze and stared back at him, with a sudden uneasy feeling washing over me. The longer I looked at him, the more red flags I began to notice. To my 9-year-old mind, this man was dressed very strangely, and that had already been an immediate red flag. But the creepiest thing that stood out to me was his face. His face had absolutely no expression of any kind. There was just this intense and piercing stare with him looking directly at me. It felt like he was staring right through me, and for at least 2 minutes, we stared at each other, never looking away or even blinking. Eventually, the uneasy feeling built up enough for me to slowly walk myself down off the porch and over to the side of our house, never looking away from the man. When I made it out of sight, I ran to the backyard to tell my dad about what had just happened. I came up to him as he finished mowing the backyard and described what I had seen. And that was when he told me that he had seen this man the other day doing the same thing, except just staring straight down our street, arms crossed, plain white t-shirt, pajama pants, no shoes, just like when I had seen him. After that, my dad told me that he thought the man seemed off and to stay far, far away from him. Unfortunately, that would not be the last time that I saw the man at the end of our street. From that point on, I would see this man much more often. I would be riding in the car with my family or outside doing something in our yard or on our block, and I would look over and see him standing in the same spot, arms crossed, intensely staring. He wasn't there 24/7, but at least 3 days a week I would see him outside, sometimes for 5 or more hours at a time. If not staring at me, staring at someone walking their dog or a car passing by. Once I tried to figure out his schedule so I wouldn't have to be around him as much, but it felt too creepy to keep track of him because he would occasionally start scanning his head around looking for people to lock onto, which really creeped me out. Now, some of you may be thinking, he's just staring and not doing anything. That's not that bad, right? Well, sadly, I would later find out things were far worse than I had ever imagined. So fast forward about 9 years. I'm now 18 years old and looking to get a job to save up for my first car. I hadn't really been able to save any money up at that point, and my parents weren't in any position to help me with purchasing one. So I knew that I had to try to find a job that would be easy for me to get to and that would pay me enough for me to hopefully get a cheap car quickly. Lo and behold, the steel treating factory next to the creepy man's house has a now hiring sign out front, and I decided that a 2-minute walk to work had to be worth it, even if it meant walking by creepy man's house. I had seen this guy doing this routine for almost a decade at this point and figured that it wasn't going to be a problem. So I apply and end up getting the job. It was hard work, which usually consisted of heavy physical labor and keeping up a constant pace, but nothing I hadn't expected. I started off fairly slowly and ended up getting much better and able to do tasks much faster. About 3 months in, I was assigned to work on a machine that I had not previously worked on, located in the building loading dock. From the loading dock, I had a clear view of the wooden fence that separated the factory loading zone from the creepy man's house, as well as the front of his driveway where he would normally stand. I couldn't see the man standing at his post, but I was able to notice a large hole in the fence, which seemed like it had been made in some kind of accident. The fence was not broken cleanly, but there were splinters and cracks in the fence where the hole had been made. I asked the floor worker who was with me at the dock, let's call him Ronnie, if he knew anything about this, and this actually got us into a longer conversation about the creepy man. Ronnie had been with the steel treating factory for over 15 years, and had seen the man during his staring routine more than once. According to Ronnie, the hole in the fence had been made by Creepy Man, and he had told the managers of the plant that it had been an accident with his truck. But that's not all. Ronnie then went on to tell me that creepy neighbor guy actually runs a daycare out of his house, and that it was an unregistered business and has actually led to police being called on him more than once. This surprised me, as I had never seen the police over at his house before. But after Ronnie told me this, something else occurred to me. When looking at Creepy Man's house, whenever this van wasn't sitting in his driveway, you could see one of those children's mini playgrounds with a slide and toys built into it, the kind toddlers play with. This always struck me as odd, because never once in those 9 years, up to that point, had I ever seen anybody else come or go from his house, especially not any children. But I had never really dedicated much thought into it. After Ronnie told me this, I thought back to when I had first seen him as a 9-year-old and all the other times he had stared at me growing up, and I began to wonder if he had been secretly plotting to try to get me over to his unofficial daycare. Sadly, I couldn't really confirm what Ronnie had told me, and at this point I had been dealing with my own personal problems at home, and I just filed the story into the back of my head as something I would not at all be surprised to find out was true. I left that job not long after this, as I had saved up the money I needed for a car and was able to make my way into the career field I had been hoping to make it into. Fast forward to 3 years later into one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me and the reason for my posting this. At this point, I had moved away from home, but ended up having to move back home with my parents for reasons I'm not going to get into. I had also met my girlfriend and we would spend some nights driving over to my parents' house to watch old movies or play games in my janky basement setup. By this point, my girlfriend was aware of the creepy man but paid him as much mind as anybody else. As creepy as he wasn't breaking the law by standing there, and our lives already had too much going on for us to be focusing our time and attention on his weirdness. On this night, I was driving home with my girlfriend for a normal night of watching movies. I didn't want to block my mother's car in on our single-lane driveway, so I had recently started parking in the grass patch behind our house. Behind our house was an alley that ran past everyone's backyards. Our backyard had a wooden fence up against the alley with a separate garage building which opened up into the alley. I had started to park in the grass patch area in between the garage doors and the alley more often. And so that was the direction I had been driving home, silently hoping to myself that the creepy man wouldn't be outside on a pleasant night like this. Well, of course, I had jinxed it, and the way home that I was going ended up taking us right past him, standing and staring us down. I locked eyes with him very briefly as we drove past him, headed to the right side of the T intersection to turn into the alley to go behind my house. But here's where things got scary. For some reason, I don't know why, as we passed by the creepy man, I got a really bad feeling. A feeling very similar to the day I had first met him. A gut-wrenching, something is wrong kind of feeling. And so I decided to look in my driver's side mirror. To my horror, the creepy man had actually left his post, and started walking quickly in my direction. I can honestly say that this was the first time I had ever seen the creepy man not standing completely still. And here he was, walking the same direction I had gone. As my thoughts started racing, I turned into the alleyway and then went 4 houses down, turning into the grass patch behind the garage in our backyard. I immediately told my girlfriend what I had seen and how strange it was. I did not want her to freak out, but I also didn't want her to get blindsided if something bad was about to happen. From the angle that my car was parked, I could turn around in my driver's seat and stare at the alleyway through the slits of the window fence in our backyard. I would be able to see if he was coming and if he rounded the corner. I locked my car doors, turned in my seat, and reached into my pocket to tightly grip my pocket knife. My eyes widened and my heart started beating fast as I saw him casually walking down the alley through the slits, right up to the edge of the wooden fence, and then pause. After a few moments, he turned around 180 degrees and started walking back down the alley in the direction he came from. I waited about 2 minutes before getting out of my car and slowly approaching the edge of the fence, then walking into the alley to see that he was gone. I have thought about this quite a bit since it happened 2 years ago. I don't actually know if he recognized me or the house that I had pulled into, or why he chose that night to follow me and my girlfriend and scare the hell out of us. Honestly, I don't really care. I was able to move out of that house shortly after that happened and am now living with my girlfriend, who today is my fiance. But to the man that stared at me in my entire neighborhood for over half my life, and who followed me and my girlfriend to a dark alley for God knows what reason, let's never meet again. That was a very long and suspenseful story, not gonna lie. To me, if I were to guess, I think this person probably just has a severe form of OCD or some other mental health condition. I mean, that's the only way that I could really explain them standing around for like several hours at a time, barely moving. That's just my thought, though. I don't know. Him breaking the mold and just suddenly chasing down the alleyway is definitely like that. I mean, I have no idea. I'm still really curious in the whole daycare aspect of it, because that's also a really odd insert. Like, was that just a rumor at the steel treating facility, or was there, more to it? Because it's kind of weird that in the 9 years of him living there, he never once saw a child being dropped off, but the steel workers seem to believe there is some kind of unofficial daycare being run out there. And, that also does lead to the fact of maybe he does have kind of like an Overwatchy feel and he's watching over the neighborhood in his off time when he's not watching kids. Maybe that's just, I don't know. Personally, I just love to hear some theories in the comments, because I'm kind of all over the place with how I'm feeling on this one. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.